whether we could do vector search in a predictable way, cost efficiency, low latency with this scale.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk more about Weaviate at booking and all these particular. I guess like for me, it's kind of like what does academic vector search miss? These things like this particular case of filtered vector search. Of all these different examples, like you could have a high cardinality filter, you could have a random filter, or you could have a filter that's like correlated with the vector embeddings. Like you use the Amazon reviews data set and you have like electronics, home and office, and that can like kind of skew how you're traversing a filtered vector search. And
Because
the high. Oh, sorry.
yeah, we had all the use cases in our minds. We knew the requirements. We really support some complex queries, bunch of filters, sometimes hybrid search. And there are, of course, non-functional requirements like low latency, cost efficiency, etc. But there's also functional requirements, and picking up a customized solution was obvious for us. So we also compared those functionalities, and it's also important to use a product that is constantly evolving. And so in this also Gen AI space, all these initiatives, they started from a baseline, but it's all of them are constantly evolving, and maybe it is as such. Like not even every quarter, but every month we get to hear a new feature enabled. It's a fast moving space to be in. So yeah, I can talk more about the evaluation setup and all of it.
I'd love to hear that. It really, it's always cool seeing all the new things people are working on. I can't even keep up with all that. Yeah, so maybe I'd love to talk about, maybe if we could just sort of set the stage about the sort of 100 million scale, maybe even just start from the beginning. I think I kind of read into it with a little context, but you mind explaining how you evaluated Weaviate?
Yeah, so as I mentioned at the beginning as well, we started with OpenSearch and we already onboarded many use cases and teams, which allowed us to see the need, the scale that we're operating, and also in the horizon, we had more use cases coming in with more needs, more specialized features, perhaps. So we selected some vendors to run evaluation. Well, I'm going to only name Weaviate as the picked one. But basically, it's the evaluation setup needed to reflect the scale at booking. This is also why we couldn't trust the generic benchmarks. I'm sure they reflect the reality in that context and in that scale. But as I said, we're operating at we have data sets with 100 millions of embeddings. How does it actually scale when these are in place? What is the latency? What if we have concurrency increase? So we created this evaluation setup with public data set. You could use anything with 100 million embeddings. And we created a setup where we would send queries, approximate KNN queries, with and without filters, because we also have a lot of use cases using filters. And it can add complexity to the query. So it should also still perform well. We increase the concurrency. So we basically run a bunch of experiments comparing all these different queries, increasing the concurrency, and we basically record the performance in terms of latency, but also throughput. And eventually, we had a nice overview of different vendors. Also, our baseline is OpenSearch. So this overview gave us to make a decision which vendor stays more stable under under very high concurrency. What is the maximum throughput they can handle? And 100 million embeddings really reflect the scale we're operating. So that's why we really wanted to create an evaluation set that is useful. Eventually, it was we were very happy to see that the results are great and ready to onboard actual use cases. So, well, I think the biggest learning is really owning the most important takeaway from this process is not about a specific vendor or feature. It's about ownership of the evaluation itself. Because again, benchmarks reflect some baselines, but we know our need, we know our scale. So evaluating based on our custom needs and scale is the important part. So now
Yeah.
it's a foundational infrastructure for our ML systems.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, that kind of evals is foundational infrastructure. I know a lot of people in this sort of AI world are going to be love to hear that. And yeah, I guess that these two topics around the filtered vector search and then the high concurrency, I think they both are just so interesting on their own. I guess like I'm a huge fan of vector search with filtering. I think Weaviate was the first to implement Acorn, which is like a particular algorithm for it. And I guess, yeah, like I was playing a bit with, I've just been on Booking.com kind of trying to
Yeah.
learn more about the experience. And so I'm kind of curious about like, I imagine like with say like a hotel search use case, I would first say like, I'm traveling to Miami. And then I was thinking like, wow, that could be such a restrictive filter. Because if I have all of my say 100 million hotels and I just applied Miami filter, that could take me all the way down to like 1,000 out of 100 million just right out of the gate.
Yeah, obviously for example, partner to guest messaging, when we search for hotel response templates, we obviously reduce the search space into only that specific hotel. So that's a filter query. Many use cases actually use filters, and they are more complex, especially like when I look at VB8 options. Like there are options to add more filters, multi-vector, hybrid, different filter types. The queries can get very complex. Like the important piece is staying still under the low latency constraint, and also still accommodating the concurrency need.
Yes, then I'd love to double click on the concurrency need too. It's been a long time since I've looked at the Weaviate code personally, but when I did back in the day, I saw there was like all this locking going. There's like layers of locking. I think that's how particularly it works. Is we have like this particular locking for how you concurrently read and write to HSW in addition to things like async.
That was another test we did actually. In addition to this filter and non-filtered queries, we also had writes during reads to measure whether writes are impacted by reads are impacted by the writes. So little details, but when you actually face with a production system, these all are matter.
At one of our Weaviate company offsites, we had a trivia team, and my team, we called ourselves the Sharded Lock Cache, which is like, have you done this? I guess, maybe if I actually don't have a great understanding of this myself, and I'd love to just kind of understand it further about how you think about concurrent clients. And is it like how you run this test where you have this kind of like, I think you have like, just
this was a Java multi-thread setup. We basically send queries from multi-thread parallel queries, but it was actually restricted by the system whether it can help. So each vector database that we kept sending queries, we were obviously waiting for the response as well. Technically, even though we increased the concurrency, we increase the number of threads that are sending queries to the target system, which is a vector database. The maximum throughput that the system can handle obviously was decided by the target system. So we did see like higher latency and lower throughput. Obviously, these are proportional. And but like we were happy to see the high concurrency was actually accommodated well by Weaviate, for example, much better compared to OpenSearch.
Yeah, super cool. Yeah,
These are, of course, also the infrastructure setup, because you can always add more CPUs. I think you're using vCPU. You can always extend it to accommodate the need, but here we're also optimizing the cost. So we're basically aiming for the lowest cost setup possible to accommodate this like high throughput requirements, while keeping it. All these matter. So these are all different parameters that we needed to optimize.
Yeah, I think that like provisioning the database topic, that's another super deep one. Yeah, so amazing. Yeah, I think all the blog post on comparing these things and just diving into it's all super cool, and just yeah, obviously we're super excited about it. Weaviate, and it's just yeah, super cool. Awesome.